All right. So just a couple of quick announcements and such. Once I have focus. There we go. So one, I want to thank our sponsors. So, you know, Modus and Tech Systems, they've been longtime sponsors. They're actually not doing much right now because we're not meeting a physical location. We're not getting food. But I like keeping them on here because they have been, you know, a part of our group for so long and have always given, you know, a lot to us. And then Green Events Technology, that is the company I run. That's how I legally do everything. That's the best way I explain that. And so I put that logo on here so I can legally say that we're running this event, right? All right, so some upcoming meetups. So on June 18th, so this month we're having 2 .NET meetups. And there are probably other months where we'll have 2 meetups. Nice part about being, you know, doing everything online, it's a lot easier. I don't have to find a meeting place and all that good stuff. But on June 18th, we'll have Michael Perry coming to join us to talk about ACID 2.0 and how to build better APIs and messages. I'll tell you what, Michael Perry is one of the smartest people I know. So that will be an awesome talk. I have not seen it before, but I've heard really good things about that talk. So I highly recommend you join us on that'll be on June 18th.
There it is. Hey, I'm sorry for the alternate. My other webcam's under my desk, and it always defaults to that one. I don't know why.
Oh, no problem. All right, so some other meetups. So on that should be June.
I can't zoom in Zoom, which kind of seems kind of an oxymoron. But yeah, it always gives me the wide angles.
Doug, you're talking over my slides, but I do have a way to quiet you down for a moment. So other meetups. So actually should say June, matter of fact, I don't even think what is that date supposed to be? That should be June 25th, not May 28th. Sorry about that, but we'll have Sarah, I never can pronounce her last name, that's why she just goes by Suzuki. Really great speaker. She's going to be talking about Azure Notebooks. So, you know, if you're doing any type of analysis with any type of data within Azure, you know, that you will find a lot of use out of that. And then we have a lot of other meetups, right? You know, there's Tech Leaders, which meets, we actually met this morning. It's a second Tuesday of the month that we meet. So if you're in any type of tech leadership role, check that out. You know, we're here to help you out. Louisville IT Happy Hour. We will be meeting next Tuesday. So it's supposed to be today, but we bumped it to next Tuesday. So definitely, you know, that's a great group, especially for socializing with other folks. And the other 2 groups are actually a little bit in hiatus right now, just because they're not working as well during the pandemic. But you know, there is Tech Ladies, which will come back, and then the Remote Workers Meetup, which funny. I mean, that whole purpose of that was actually to get people out of the house, you know, who work from home. So it doesn't really work as well in the pandemic. And I do have other meetings coming up. Actually, I've got a really special guest coming in a couple months, but I can't announce who it is yet. Let's just say it is someone who you all depend on greatly, you know, especially if you are a C# developer. That's all I'll say. And I've got some other great speakers I'm talking to. I would expect by the end of this week, I'll have the summer booked out with some really great talks. All right, quick plug for myself. I do a daily Twitch stream called Taylor and Code. And just like this says, you know, so we talk about software development. We hopefully learn from each other. And then, you know, we write code. What I've been focused on recently is building a kind of a mix of 2 projects, building a Gremlin ORM. So Gremlin is awesome. I love dealing with graph databases, but Gremlin, the code, is not the easiest thing to write applications with. So I'm actually trying to build an ORM. At the same time, I'm building the new Copalooza website that will have recommendation engines, which graph databases are awesome for that. So, Copalooza, I'm sure no one's ever heard me mention about Copalooza, but August 19th through 21st. So sure enough, just one ticket type, right? And so you get, with that one ticket, you get access to everything. So you don't have to. It's not like an extra price to go to the workshops. They're all available, and most everything for attendees will be available afterwards. There are a couple sessions, and at least one workshop that will not be available afterwards due to licensing agreements they have with other things. So that's what that point was. Is that's all going to be available. A couple other things. We're going to have an online open space. So open space is a great concept. Basically, hey, I want to talk about this. I put it on, usually you put it on the board. This will be online, and then other people, and then you pick a time, and then other people who have that same interest will join in, and you just talk about it, right? And so it's a really good way to talk about things you want to hear about. We're still going to have online networking, so I know most everyone thinks that they're complete introverts, but the biggest thing you get out of going to a conference is meeting other folks, and we have actually ways to do that. Along with, you're still going to be able to meet with our sponsors, right? We actually have video interactions with them, so it's not just a cheesy expo hall online where you just see logos and stuff. You'll actually be able to talk to everyone. And there's a caveat here, but the plan is to also send all attendees a t-shirt in the mail, because to me that's an important part of a conference, is getting those t-shirts. The big caveat on that, based upon budgets, it is based upon that we get 500 or more attendees. That's where our point is, that we can actually start affording that. All right, now sure enough, you can win a ticket to Copalooza. So if you go to this address, and I'll leave this up for a moment, and I'll put it in the chat here in a moment too. But you go to this, and then you can see there's 7 ways to enter. Obviously, I'm pushing my stuff also, because you follow Tail Learn Code and so forth. But you do those things, and and those pluses, those are the number of chances you get by doing that action. So this is open until, I forgot, 2 weeks basically. I forgot the exact date. I should remember what date I put the end date on. I'll once Scott talks, I'll look that up again, and I'll send the end date. But like I say, definitely a good way to win a free ticket to Copalooza. All right, then one last thing I've got. We started this today. So on my daily Twitch stream, I am interviewing on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm interviewing Copalooza speakers. Today we had Kevin Griffin. I had a blast doing that, and I hope people really enjoyed that. Obviously not because of me, but because of Kevin, right? I mean, it's always because of the other person on there. But so you can see we've got some really great names on here. And a couple names you probably haven't heard of, right? But this is your way of meeting some of the speakers. This is just a very small set of the speakers. We have 103 speakers this year. But so this will be it. There will be, actually, there's already one more scheduled. I just actually haven't had a chance to update this slide. That'll be the Tuesday before Copalooza. And then we're going to have some others at other times, because I've got other speakers coming to me and say, hey, boy, you filled up real quick. I would love to still be part of the interview. And so we'll do them other times. I didn't want to take up all my daily streams to be interviews, because I do want to write code. Because like I say, I am trying to get a project done. So, okay, and then the last thing, normally, especially for those who normally come to our user group, we normally go to BJ's Restaurant, which for those from out of town, BJ's is not just here in Louisville, but it's like right around the corner from where we normally meet. Well, we can't go to BJ's. Actually, they are open now, but you can't go as a group. We will be sticking around on Zoom, pretty much as long as people want to stick around, right? And again, the recording will be turned off, so you don't have to worry about embarrassing yourself and it being on the internet. I mean, it is on the internet, but it's not being recorded, right? Yeah, Sean, you would, yeah. All right, so with that, so we have Scott Hunter, which I do see Scott is in here. Great. So let me make Scott a host so that he can share his screen as such. Once I find him in the list.
For me, I'm sitting right next to you, Chad.
Well, that's because everyone's sitting right next to me as far as on their screen. Oh, there you are. You were actually right next to me.
I was right next to you. That's what I said.
See, that's how well I pay attention. I'm a director now, right? I don't pay attention to things. I have other people to do that. So with that, so sure enough, I mean, so for those who don't know who Scott Hunter is, number one, where have you been? So Scott basically is in charge of everything .NET. And that's probably the easiest way to explain it. And he really does have a great vision for .NET. And so it's great to have him here tonight and hear, what they've got coming up for .NET 5, and hopefully maybe we'll hear about some other future stuff coming up. So with that, Scott, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, you folks are lucky because you're going to be the second group that will get to see something that nobody's seen outside of Microsoft yet. So everything did not fit into build. And so I have saved one pretty cool thing that you're going to be the first to see. I showed some folks in the UK earlier today that you will be the next. Okay, with that said, I don't know if people saw what we did at Build. We did two things at Build. Let me share my screen here. I assume everybody can hear me and everything works?
Yes.
Good. At Build this year, they had a weird format, a 20-minute format, which was not exactly what folks like myself and Scott Hanselman were looking for. There's so much going on in .NET that there's no way to talk about it all in 20 minutes. And so we did a 20-minute session 3 times across 3 different time zones, and then we did a longer version. And I'm going to give you folks a slightly different version than either one of those today. And hopefully we can have some time to ask some questions afterwards. So as Chad said, I am the Director of Program Management at Microsoft in the .NET team. I joined Microsoft in 2007. And you might know some of my colleagues that joined around the same time I did. Phil Hack, who's one of the big people that worked on MVC and NuGet. Scott Hanselman, who we didn't actually work together when he first joined, but he's on my team now, driving my community. And then you might have heard of David Fowler. He joined right about the same time that I did, so kind of the 4 of us all started at the same time. And part of what you'll hear today is kind of some of the things that we hoped we could accomplish in 2007 when we had no idea what we were doing, and where we are today. So I always start these things off. When I joined in 2007, .NET basically did the left 2 columns. You could build desktop and web, but there was no way to do cloud, mobile, gaming, IoT, AI, and those are workloads that .NET has kind of evolved into over time. Folks always ask me, how are we doing? .NET's 18 years old, which is crazy. 18 years public. The 20-year anniversary is coming up soon. For an 18-year-old product, we did kind of reinvigorate the products in 2017. That was the first version of Visual Studio that supported .NET Core. And since 2017, we've brought over 1.5 million people to .NET Core. This slide's actually a little out of date. This was Stack Overflow 2019. In Stack Overflow 2020 survey, ASP.NET Core was the most loved web framework, and .NET Core was the most loved other framework. I'm not sure what other means, but I'll take it. We were late to the open source game. We open sourced in 2014. That was something that Hanselman, Phil Hack, and I all had a passion about in 2007. And it started off with NuGet, and then we just kind of an MVC, and we just went further and further and further, and now the entire platform is there. We're the top 5 language on GitHub. We're 7 times faster than Node.js in the Tech and Power benchmark. Our team now has a culture around performance, trying to be one of the fastest stacks on the planet. And you'll see that in the 5 wave. There's a whole bunch of perf work coming there as well. And then about 40% of the people that come to our platform now are students. Once again, for an 18-year-old framework, we added 1 million developers last year, which I think is healthy pretty much any year. And 600,000 of those were .NET Core developers. So you start to see that shift happening towards .NET Core. And then, you can also see that, .NET Core was the first version of .NET that really supported Linux. And last year we had over 1 million publishes from the Visual Studio tools to Linux. And so that's showing that, making Linux a priority was important and has been used by our teams. Something that I assume everybody will appreciate is if you've been on the .NET journey for a long time, you know that moving from like .NET Framework 4.0 to 4.5 because you wanted async await, for many companies that took years, 3, 4, 5 years for those moves to happen. And as we envisioned .NET in the core wave, we wanted people to come faster, and we did that by having side-by-side support. And with that, when we shipped .NET Core 3 in September of 2019, within the first 6 weeks, 75% of all .NET Core developers had at least tried .NET Core 3, which is just crazy to think 6 weeks compared to like 4 or 5 years. But that's good. We want people to be on the tip of the stack and be using all the latest features. And our intent is to let you keep your old applications on .NET Core 2.1 and try the new stack, or even try the .NET 5 bits as they come out. So we're very happy about that. Stack Overflow, they completed their migration to .NET Core 3.1 a month or so ago. And my favorite thing of this was when Nick Craver was tweeting that when they first booted it up, their system that checks to see if the site is operational failed, saying the site was failing. And that's because .NET Core 3.1 is so much faster than the previous version of Stack Overflow that the requests are coming back too fast, and their test framework is saying that's a glitch. So they had to readjust all their health checks because of the perf of .NET Core 3.1. Same thing has happened for us inside of Microsoft. We're in the process of moving a bunch of our teams, various parts of Bing around .NET Core. Azure Cosmos DB runs .NET Core, and all of them have seen some of the Power Apps backend runs on .NET Core. Like Power Apps, they saw a 25% decrease in latency. The Cosmos DB folks saw a 25% reduction of memory usage. And the Bing folks saw a 50% reduction in CPU. So all across the stack, you see various teams seeing large improvements as they move to core. At Build, our main focus was, what are we giving to people today? And there was 3 big things that kind of came out of the build timeframe. And that number 1 is we shipped ASP.NET Blazor WebAssembly. Blazor shipped with .NET Core 3.0 back in September of last year. And excuse me. And what it brought to the .NET stack was what we call full stack web development with .NET. For the first time ever, you could actually write .NET on the client and write it on the server. And every Blazor app is a SPA application. You don't have to use a SPA framework. Just write your code in Razor and C#, and you get an awesome SPA mechanism. The cool thing about the Blazor that we shipped in September was we call it Blazor Server, and it's one of the lightest weight SPA frameworks you'll ever find, because we don't run a big JavaScript framework on the client. We run a very small, thin JavaScript client on the client. And what it does is we actually render the page on the server. We send the server page to the client. If you do an interaction, we have a signal R channel. We send the request back to the server. It re-renders that part of the site. We send the diff back to the client. And so you end up with this really, really small network usage flavor of Blazor. Now at Build, just a few weeks ago, we introduced Blazor WebAssembly. And for folks that don't know, WebAssembly is a technology that lets you actually run a variety of languages directly in your browser. And it works across all the browsers on desktops and on mobile devices. And it's fully sandboxed, meaning it's not like a Flash or an ActiveX or any of those types of technologies that leak out of browsers and cause problems. So it's safe and secure. And because it runs in the browser, it means you can, for the first time ever, really build progressive web applications in .NET that are fully offline. And so at Build, we had this demo of a car app for a car rental place where you would actually, look at the license plate, put the mileage in, put the fuel in, and that app could work completely perfectly with no internet at all. And then when it would connect back to the internet, it would sync the data back up. And I don't know if I'm going to get to that demo today because it just depends on how long we go. But this is all now included in the .NET Core 3.1 SDK, and it ships as part of Visual Studio 16.6, which also ships to Build. So that's a super exciting part of .NET. I'm going to skip the demos right now, and we'll come back and do some other stuff. We also, with .NET Core 3, we brought WinForms and WPF. And you'd be surprised, we still have millions of developers active every month building their applications on WinForms and WPF. And the WPF designer was in the initial release of .NET Core 3.0, but the WinForm designer is just now starting to complete itself. So it shipped, and I'll show you how to turn it on in a little bit. It shipped in 16.6 as a preview feature, and then we're at 16.7 preview 2. That completed all the controls that we're bringing into the WinForm designer. So the designer, for the most part, is complete at this point. Minus it doesn't support third-party controls, and we hope to have that, sometime later this year. So this has come along a long ways. And then another thing that we shipped at Build was we shipped Model Builder. It's out of preview. It's now in production. And so we had shipped a machine learning library called ML.NET about a year ago at Build in 2019. And, I'm not an ML expert, but we then built a tool called Model Builder, which is in Visual Studio. You can right-click on a project and say Add Machine Learning, and it will actually go and walk you through a wizard for some common machine learning mechanisms, and you can both train locally or train in the cloud. And then it will write the model for you and write the code to paste in to actually call the model. So it does a lot of this work for you. It's, I said, RTM in the builds today, and if we have time, we'll do a quick demo of that a little bit later on. And it kind of puts us at a point now where what I've been saying for a bit is, with .NET Core 3.1, that's what shipped in December. That's got long-term support, so it's got 3 years plus support from us. It's got WPF, WinForms. It's got self-contained XEs, which we'll demo in a little bit. It's got modern web UI with Blazor, and it's got a bunch of new C# 8 features. And I'm being too nice. We had, gRPC was in here. It's kind of the replacement for WCF. There's a bunch better tooling in here for building REST APIs and have us auto-generating the clients for you. And so we think with this, if you're a .NET developer, you're building any new applications, .NET Core 3.1 is what you should be looking at. We pulled all the features we're going to pull from .NET Framework moving forward into .NET Core, so it's kind of the completion state. And now's a great time to move to 3.1. Now, with that said, I'll quickly close this out and say, for those WinForm controls, the WPF controls, and even Blazor controls, here's a group of awesome vendors that help us with all those. They don't have WinForms coming yet. The Progress folks had a demo that we didn't get a chance to do at Build, where we had the designer working with their controls, so we're getting close there. But thanks to these partners. But let's get to what I really care about, and I'll give you some of my jokes. So, Microsoft's a funny company. As we mentioned during this call a couple times, we shipped the first version of .NET Framework in 2002. And Microsoft does funny things. As soon as we wanted to, make the .NET brand a big brand, folks in marketing decided that we just rebrand all Microsoft products to .NET. So there was a product called Windows Server .NET. Now the joke about that to me is Windows Server .NET did not actually include .NET. You still had to download it and install it manually on the Windows Server. So I don't know why they put it on the box, but I guess they were trying to get the .NET brand out, so they put it everywhere. And then, of course, .NET Framework was super successful. And as all successful things are, what do? You make lots of them. So we didn't stop with .NET Framework. We made the Compact Framework as well for small mobile devices at the time. We, of course, made Silverlights. We made Windows Phone. We made UWP. We made Windows 8 apps. I mean, we've made more .NETs. There's a micro framework. And there's two ways to get promoted at Microsoft, and that's to have your name be Scott, as in Scott Guthrie, or Scott Hunter, or Scott Hanselman, or to make another .NET. And so I get to put a title to myself that I was one of the ones with a bunch of my team that made .NET Core, which we actually started at the end of 2013. So I made another .NET. But now I look at it as my job is to clean up all the .NETs that are there. So as I mentioned before, we're not bringing any more technologies from .NET Framework into .NET Core. We're done with that. But we do want to make sure that if you're building a Xamarin app, which uses Mono today, that's using the exact same BCL that we use for .NET Core. And so I think of this vision as, we have .NET Framework 4.8 out right now. We have .NET Core 3.1. We could have made .NET Core 4, and then we would have had to explain .NET Framework 4, .NET Core 4. And so instead, we decided to move forward and we've taken the best of .NET Framework. We've added some new tech to that. And we're going to call this the new .NETs, .NET 5, .NET 6, et cetera, et cetera. And that's mainly because .NET 5 is a bigger number than 4. And it clearly states to our customers that, .NET 5, aka .NET Core vNext, is the future. Now we have a couple of really cool things we want to do with this. One is a single SDK for all those app types, whether it's web, desktop, mobile, IoT, AI. We want one SDK that lets you build all those. But I also don't want to be known as the person that went and took the big framework, made a smaller version of it, and then made it big again. And so our goal with this is the SDK, once we get to .NET 6, will only do console and class library. Any other workload you want to add, you'll have to basically say .NET install ASP.NET, .NET install desktop, .NET install Maui. And the idea is to have a small SDK that's composable, and developers can bring the parts they want versus having us just go chunk a bunch of stuff on your machine. Every app type would use the exact same BCL. So a Xamarin app today, which uses the Mono BCL, will now be using the .NET Core BCL. The benefit that means as you share code across all these different app types, that they work the same way. And we want a unified tool chain. If you build Xamarin projects today, you can't do those from command line with .NET new Xamarin. It doesn't exist. We want to make any app type have the exact same tool chain. We want to have awesome cross-platform UI, and I'll talk about that in a bit. We want to have awesome cross-platform web UI. And we have some of that today with Blazor and MVC and Razor Pages and stuff like that. But I'm going to show you a quick demo later today of a crazy, how far can we take this? But I think it'll be exciting. You'll like it. We want to have awesome cloud native investments. This is a very, very important part for us. We've all heard Docker, Kubernetes, containers, microservices. How do we make .NET awesome for all those things? And there's a bunch of cool stuff we're doing in the space to do that. And then, of course, always make it faster, smaller, better diagnostics. I really think at the end of the 5-6 wave, we'll be back to being able to say that every single app type we have, we are first class compared to other technologies out there. So let's talk about cloud native real quick and do a couple of demos. And I will apologize, some of these demos are on my machine, and some of these demos will be videos that I will play. And that's because at Build, I have the luxury of having a variety of devices. I've got this one and another one over here. I'm not going to try to switch between a whole bunch of devices on the screen here. And I have a lot of devices because some of these have kind of experimental bits. But the first one is we want to make building cross-platform apps on a Windows machine awesome as possible. And so with WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux, you can build or you can run Linux directly on Windows really, really easily. WSL 2 just shipped with Windows 2004, Windows 10 2004, and we have awesome support for building in Visual Studio on that. we hear that people look at .NET and compare it to Go and Rust and go, well, it looks like your microservices are fatter. That's because ours have more features or more security hardened and just better. But we do want to make single file apps smaller and better in .NET. We want to make it where you can build .NET apps without as much junk in your files. And we have a bunch of stuff in C#9 and .NET 5 to solve some of these. And then probably, this is probably the coolest demo I think today, minus the Maui demo, is we want to make it easy to build microservice style applications. I mean, a modern application probably has a back-end app. It's got a front-end app. It might have another back-end app. It might have a Postgres database or a Redis cache or a SQL database. And how do we make .NET make it easy to build those things? And so let's drill into those. I'm going to skip that, and I'll jump out here. And we'll first do one of these. We'll do a video. We're just about a week away from me being able to do all these on my local machine again. Once a few bits are out of preview a little bit more, and I don't worry about them nuking my box. But this is something pretty cool here. I'm in Visual Studio. I'm going to do a File New, and I'm just going to choose an Infinite Core web app. Click Next, and we're going to call this Web App Linux. And we'll create that. And I'm just going to choose a regular web application. I could have enabled Docker, but I don't want to do that right now. I want to show you that I can do Linux without Docker. And so we'll let Visual Studio create this project for us. I'm going to move over here to the Pages folder, and I'm going to open up the index.cs.html. And let's go add an H2 right here and print environment OS version. And let's just run this. This will do what you would expect. I'm on a Windows machine with Visual Studio. And so this is going to launch me. And the app's going to come up here and show that I'm running 10.0.1904, which is the magic version of Windows with WSL. Now, something new here on my machine, I've got an extension added, so I now have WSL2 in my dropdown. This is the Windows subsystem for Linux. I can just select that. And now when I run the application, let's accept the certs for the HTTPS. This will be very quick, bang, bang, bang. Now that same application is running on Unix on my Windows box. So I'm on Linux using Ubuntu, and it's that easy. Not only can you run your application in WSL2, I can also, we put the debugger through it as well. And so I can put a breakpoint here, F5 in, and my breakpoint hits on Linux, which is pretty cool, I think. And then we want to show one final thing here, which is we've done a lot of work to improve Docker. And so I can come over here and I can add Docker. And I'll select Linux here. And it used to be that we created another project and a bunch of other ceremony. Now we just add a single file, a Docker file to your project. And you can see we say basically we want our base image to be Buster Slim. And then we have, this is a multi-stage Docker file. It grabs another image with the SDK in it, and it uses that to compile the app and then publish it into that first image. And notice in the background, it was actually doing work to pre-compile the application in the container. And that means when I'm ready to run it, I'm going to get a really good inner loop because it's already fired up and ready to go here. And so we'll just run this, accept the cert again. And the app's going to come up, and now I'm running in Docker. And I can show that by going to the command prompt here, Docker ps-a to show all the processes, and there I am running in containers. So I just showed in just 2 or 3 minutes, I was able to actually run on Windows, on WSL, on containers, all super, super, super fast. The reason I did a video for this is because we have a bug in .NET 5 preview that I have on my machine that basically every time you do this, it destroys the HTTPS cert on the machine. You saw me pressing all those accepts. After you press those a couple times, you have to nuke the cert with Cert Manager. And so the preview 6 that's going to come out tomorrow actually will fix that, and I can do that demo live on my machine without having to do any weird stuff. Let's show C#9. So this is projects that I have, and I'm using top-level programs. This is letting me build a C# application where I don't have any main. How can we remove some of the ceremony here? And so notice I'm just using system, console write line. There's no goop here. It runs just like you would expect. And if I'm really tricky, I could just go and take the using system out, put that right there. Maybe I could even have some default namespaces that we turn on to make this super easy. But now I've got a very simple application with not a lot of ceremony. And we're trying to compare ourselves to other languages. So I can go over here in my CS project, turn this into a web project. And I want to close this out. And I'll just nuke this. And I'll erase some white space here. And really what I want to show here is you can build a microservice in .NET Core in under 20 lines of code. Some of the other languages consider this to be a strength, and we want to say that we're going to make it as easy and simple to write these projects in .NET for you. And you can see it runs just like you would expect. And so we're going to call this is a feature called top-level programs. And I hope to actually take it a step further than this and even let you potentially in the long run just run a CS project file by, I mean, not a CS project, a CS file by itself. So kind of give you a scripty style of C# for folks that like that. Now, before we get to Thai, I'll do one more of these, and this is going to show some of the highlights, some of the work we've done since .NET Core 3. So .NET Core 3 and 3.1, they both support single file, and so what you can do, notice here that I'm passing a parameter here, publish single file equals true. And I'm also saying publish trimmed equals true. And single file, this basically means I'm going to create a single exe. Because of that, I need to tell it what kind of platform I want to run on, whether it's Linux, Mac, or Windows, because it can't make 3 exes. It could, but it's going to make one of that type, single file, and then the publish trim basically tells us to go link out as much of .NET Core that you don't need. And this is an area you're going to see us continue to grow as we move forward. So let's let this run. And do notice that it does warn you here. I think it's very clear. Optimizing assemblies for size, which may change the behavior of the app. By optimizing for size, it means we do some tree shaking to look at your app and go, we don't think you're calling this assembly, so let's just nuke the assembly. Well, if you used reflection to load that assembly, we can't see that. And so we can break the app. Now, there's simple ways of telling us not to link out something. And I hope to give you tools to make that even better in the long run. But let's go take a look at what this looks like on disk. So let's go into single file, then release, .NET Core 3.1, go to publish. And as you see here, I end up with about a 45 meg executable. And this is self-contained. You could copy this to any Windows machine with no .NET Core in it at all, and it would just run. I can come over here. I'm going to run the same command again, except this time I'm doing it on .NET 5. You can see I have a private copy of .NET in this folder just to make sure that this works. And this is going to show you some of the improvements that we made in the linker in the 5 wave, and it's quite dramatic actually. So while I'm waiting for that to do its thing, I'll jump back up. Go into single file. Okay, and so here we are again. Now I'm 17.5 megs. So we basically lost 30 megs between .NET Core 3.1 and .NET 5. And I think it's important to show that even though I did that, the app still will run. There we go. Let's go show that. There is my 17 meg file. It will run. And if I try to launch this, and so we're trying to get to a point where we can show people that you can build a very lightweight API in .NET. You can publish it to a container. It can be very small, but you get to have all the power and strength and awesomeness of .NET. So the next thing I want to talk about is Project Thai. And what Project Tie is about one of the weaknesses we have in .NET today. Here's an app, and notice I've got a front end and a back end. If I load this app in VS Code, well, I can't really even run it in VS Code because what's it going to run? Which project? So what I would likely do is do something like this. Go to my front end folder, and I would type .NET Run. And then I would probably forget to run the backend project because why would I? If I'm using Visual Studio, yes, there is a feature where you can run multiple projects, but it's kind of kludgy. And if you do, you better make sure that all your ports map up between all your projects. So this should just run. But of course, it's going to crash. And it's going to crash because I need to run .NET Run again. And so my point that I'm trying to highlight here is to use this with VS Code in a reasonable way, other than writing a batch file over here to run both the front and the back ends. I get to a place where I got to do a bunch of manual jump to make this work. Now it works fine, great. But I said that experience is not great. So what can we do to fix that? And I'm also missing a lot by the way that I ran these. So let's close these out. And I'm just going to come here and I'm going to say tie run. And what tie is going to do, it's a global command that we installed into .NET. And it's going to go look around my machine in this folder. It's going to find all the projects and it's going to boot them up. But even better, it's going to give me a dashboard. So let's go to the dashboard. And so now it's very easy to see that I can see that I've got both a front end and a back end project running. You're going to notice it knows their CS projects. That's why it calls them projects. And it shows you the CS proj. It is the source of that project. It went and found the ports for all these things, made them very apparent. I can either call the HTTP or the HTTPS version. If I want to look at the perf counters style data for this, they're all available here. So it's very easy for me to see some perf data. And before, I was saying there's some limitations. It's also very easy for me to see my logs. I can just come over here and see the logs. That's already, I think, is an improved experience. Now, of course, when I run it, it's going to fail still. And that's because one of the goals of tie is to solve, I think, the worst problem that we have with .NET with these multi-stage, multi-project kind of applications, which is how do I do port mappings between them? And so I cannot tell you how many times that I've been in a room with Steve Sanderson or Damien Edwards, and we're working on demos and they won't work, and it's because when I did I pulled it from Git, they had not checked in the config files with the port configurations, and so all the ports changed and the app was just broken. You can see here, this app is hard-coded already to a localhost port. One of the goals of tie is to get rid of all of that. So I can just go into my CS proj. I'm going to comment out a package. This will obviously be in the framework by the time we're done with this. And this is a configuration extension. Sure. And I'll go back to my startup. And what I can do is I can comment out that hard-coded port. And now I can comment in this code right here. And what this code does is you can see that when tie boots up, it figures out what the ports for all the front-end, back-end projects are, and then it injects them dynamically into the environment variables for the running process, which means all I have to do is know the name of my project, and we'll do the port mapping for you. So with that in place, I can go run over here again. And while that's running, I can go back to my dashboard, refresh the dashboard, and I died. That was slow. That is startup perf of the .NET command tools like that is something that we actually have a nice improvement in the 5-wave. We found out we were making a web call every time that we ran that, and we're doing a package check every time we did a .NET run command like that we don't need to do. So there's some cool stuff going on. Now, here I am again. Now the app just runs. All that port mapping is happening automatically for me, and I get a pretty good experience. Now, let's throw in another scenario. I mentioned before, what if you want a SQL Server, or you want a Redis Cache, or you wanted a Postgres, or service of your choice? Typically what you do today is you might go tell all your developers, hey, go install SQL Server on your machines. Yuck. I don't want to do that. Maybe you tell your developers, go install Docker, and with Docker, go run it in a Docker container. Great, how do I do that? I need to go Google and figure out how to do that. Well, what if I go into my Thai project over here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to type Thai init. And all that changes when I do that is Thai was automatically finding my projects already. But typing that command tells us to go spit out the config that we were doing it dynamically ourselves already, which is, you can see, I built something called microservice. It's got a couple of services, front end name, and it's a CS proj, so I give it a project file, back end name, and I give it a CS proj for that. Now, this can get a little cooler if I come over here and I say I want to add Redis. So I'm just going to copy this from my notepad here. Now, I'm going to go boot up Redis in a Docker container, but I'm not going to write any Docker files. I do have to know enough about Docker and stuff to know that the name of I'm going to call this thing Redis. I need to know the name of the container file is Redis. I'm going to pass a port to it so it knows what to boot up on the port and stuff like that. And I'm going to run another copy of the exact same container. In this case, I'm going to run it, the CLI, in a monitor state. But once again, I've not really changed much of my projects here. But let's go and run Thai init, or Thai run. And so now my machine's going to go and it's going to go boot up the front end, the back end, and it's going to go boot some containers up. There we go. So let's go back to the dashboard. Run the dashboard. Now look at this. Now we can see that my front end project is a project, my back end project's a project, and I've got these two Redis instances here, and they're containers, and it knows they're containers. I still get the ability, once again, I built a log. There's the log file from my Redis cache. And so in this case, I didn't goof my machine up by installing anything on it. It's just running in a container. I stop the project, it's all gone. Nothing is messed up. Let's go use that container in my project. So I'm going to go back over here into my CS proj, and I'm going to uncomment out. We have a Stack Exchange Redis cache extension for .NET Core. I'm going to uncomment that package. I'll go back into my startup CS, and I want to go add that Stack Exchange client into my. I want to stick that in my DI. Once again, notice no ports are hard-coded in this application at all. It just uses the name of the instance inside of Thai. I'm not doing any of that goop. And then I can go to my index CSHTML file, and I've got a tag helper in here. And what the tag helper does is basically says anything inside of the block contained inside of the tag helper will get cached inside of Redis. And you can see here it names the cache weather, and then it says 5 seconds from now is when it should expire. So I'll go back, run again. And all this will solve and make an awesome inner loop, so it's really easy for you. And we'll have an awesome Visual Studio experience for this as well. There we go, we're back running again. I can go back to my dashboard. Let's go to my front end project. I'm going to click F5 a bunch of times. Nothing changes. Now I just changed. Now I changed again, so it's about 5 seconds a hit, which is exactly what we asked for. If I go to my dashboard, view my Redis logs, now you can see all those cache hits happening. And so that easy, I was able to go and get some containers running, wire them to my project, and I've got a pretty cool experience. Now, I want to show two more things, and I will stop this demo. Is if I run Thai run -- help, You can notice that there's also the feature, if I want, I can basically tell it to run all my projects in a Docker container. And so I can just do tie run -- Docker. And this is interesting because, once again, all that port mapping's happening. Now we're running all the components in their own containers. This is exactly the way your app is going to run, likely if you run it in something like Kubernetes or Azure Kubernetes Service. And so this gives you the ability to locally test the entire environment the way it would run in the cloud. If I go back to the dashboard again, and I refresh, now you'll notice that everything moved to container. Nothing is running outside of a container. The app runs just like it worked before. And so you can see that moving between running locally to running in a container is just seamless. Now, where that gets really cool for the final time is I can shut this down. I'll go back to my notepad file here. I'll grab this one piece of code here. Go back to VS Code. And let's go to my tie YAML. And up here, I'm going to add this line of code. If you know anything about containers, you store them in a registry. And so what I've done here is I've given it a name of a registry that I have in Azure already. And then I can go back to my command prompt and I could do tie. Let's just do tie by itself. Notice that one of the commands in tie is deploy. So if I just do tie deploy, this entire app, all 4 containers, will go up into the Azure Container Registry. And then if I have a Kubernetes service configured to pull from that container registry, it will pull all of those containers over into Kubernetes. And all the port mapping stuff, all the magic we just did will still happen over there. And you're running Kubernetes. And so our long-term goal is to let you run containers and multi-projects, but seriously simplify writing, Helm charts or Docker files. You still can if you want, but we want to do a lot of that for you. And so that's tie. One of my favorite things that we're working on. So now let's go back here and let's talk about cross-platform native apps. This is something that our developers have been asking for a long time, and we hope that you like what we're kind of proposing here. We're going to call these .NET Multi-Platform App Ui. That's a mouthful. My marketing person would not like me talking about that. But we kind of shrink that down to .NET Maui. And .NET Maui runs on the .NET platform. And the goals of this are basically cross-platform native UI, runs on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. It's a single project. If you've ever used Xamarin, Xamarin's got Android project, an iOS project, a Windows project, a shared project. And that's a handful. As I'm building an app, I really want to build the app once and not try to build it 4 different times. So we're going to simplify the experience quite a bit. From that single project, I should be able to just right-click and deploy to whatever platform I want to go to. This is an evolution of Xamarin Forms. All the stuff we learned over Xamarin Forms over the years, cleaned up into a much simpler way of building applications. And it's going to come out in .NET 6, but you're going to see a preview probably around September, October, as we get to the RC of .NET 5. This is what we're going to change. So we think of this also as thinking of taking the Xamarin tech and actually making it really first class and part of .NET. So instead of being Xamarin.forms, it'll be system.ui. Instead of Xamarin Essentials, it'll be system.devices. There's file new, multi-platform app UI, and there's .NET New Maui. You can build, once again, the promise of one .NET is everything builds from the same tools. We would take the Xamarin iOS and Android projects, and they just become .NET for iOS, .NET for Android. Once again, you can see this making .NET the center of all things. And they'll use the new SDK style projects. And once again, .NET New iOS, .NET New Android. That's what you would expect. So I've got 2 videos of this, and then I have a real demo on my machine that we can do afterwards as well. So the first one of these is me doing this on my Mac. And so you can see I'm on my Mac. I do make dir Maui, go into that folder. I'm going to show that new SDK style thing, .NET New Maui. And this is a prototype, and so it actually still does some of the stuff the old ones do. If you look here, I've got multiple projects. That's going to go away, but I can show the vision. And so I'll do a restore. And then we'll launch VS Code. And you never could have, you really can't build Xamarin projects today with VS Code. So this is kind of new to the experience. I'm going to bring up the main page. And I'm going to show a couple new things here. This is using a new form of generating the Xamarin style UI. In this case, I'm doing C# to define the UI. If you looked at stacks like Flutter and stuff like that, this is a new popular model. Let me just go run this on my iPhone 11 emulator. Let me open an emulator here real quick. There we go. And I'll describe some of the markup here in just a second. I'd like for the emulator to boot up with the app. Here it comes up. I can click the app. There I am. And now I'm in this new MVU, Model View Update model. Just like a Blazor app, I can just click the button. And what's cool here, you can see I defined the state up there, and now I've got a button, and it calls some C# to increment the value. I've got, let's go fix this. Just type center. Didn't even press save, just type center, and it went to the center of the screen. This is all live update. If I type pink here, value just changes to pink. If I take it back to black, it goes back to black. And notice there's no saving, refreshing, or relaunching. If I want to change the C#, sure, just change that to -. And now when I press the button over here, it goes down in value. If I want to change the label, I just go change the label to -. And so what I'm trying to show you here is we give you this new way of building the app UI, and because of live reload, hot reload, or hot restart, hot reload, it is amazingly fast in our loop, and super excited about this. I think it's gonna be awesome. I want to show one more of the Mauis, and then I'll do one on my local machine as well. Okay. This is one on Windows, and so this is showing file new multi-platform app UI. I've already got a project created, so I'll close this out, and I'll bring up a Maui project. And what I want to show here is we have not forgotten about XAML. We know that all Xamarin apps today are built on XAML. We have lots of folks with WPF, Silverlight, and UWP experience with XAML, and so we want to make sure we still support that. So all the XAML binding, all the stuff that you love is still here. But as I showed on the Mac demo, we are going to let you build this in C# as well. So you get your choice of building these apps in either XAML or C#. Whatever makes you happy. We'll have those same experiences there. Now, something else new here is I'm just going to click Windows. Because once again, this runs on all the platforms. I don't need to run an emulator, so my inner loop can be really, really good. So here I am in the debugger. You can see the tools boot up on the side here. And I can click stuff here, works just like you would expect. It's a Windows app, no emulator, just awesome, fast, easy loop. If I'm on a Mac, this will be running in as a Mac app, not a Windows app. But I want to show another feature that we've actually had in the product for a while that a lot of people don't even know about. It's called Hot Restart. And with Hot Restart, all I have to do if I have an iPhone is basically plug my iPhone into my Windows PC. I don't need a Mac at all, anywhere. All I need is the Apple developer account, which is free, and we have iTunes installed. With that, I drop the list down here. There's my iPhone. Not paying for anything. My iPhone's not in developer mode. I just go and grab that, and it just works. I can right-click and deploy. And I've got a copy of Reflector running down here. That's a tool that mirrors my iPhone to my Windows device. And so there I am. And as I click the button, you can see the value increment. And so it's just showing you seamless development, whether you want to do it locally or with an iPhone, without having to go and install developer goop or work like that. Another benefit, which you saw in the Mac demo, was it was very quick as I made a change. I didn't have to like relaunch the app and all that kind of stuff. And so we trying to make that inner loop really good. Now, the most exciting thing here is what I've done over here. This is the new .NET Maui project. And notice there's only one project here. It's got 2 new nodes. It's got a resource node, and that's where I would stick all my resources. That can be images, sound files, fonts, all the stuff I want to share across all the applications. There's my .NET Bot, which we all love. Got my TrueType fonts. So that's pretty cool. But I think the even cooler one is this platform node that I have sitting up here. And we know you still have to write app code for individual platforms. You might have some you want to call a native iOS call or a native Android call. All I've got to do here is here's all my platform types. I can open these up, and inside of them there'll be the C# files for that particular platform, and I can write my specific code inside of those files. And so the hope is that I'm showing you is 2 new ways to do markup, single project, easily run on your device without having to have emulators or weird stuff, no Mac required except to publish the final app. And so we think that's going to be really amazing. Now, let's show a crazy Maui thing. So what I've got here is I have a Maui app. And in this case, it is basically just native controls. So let's run this. And this is something that not many people have seen. So you're one of the first groups to see this. And this is an envisionment of what we could do. So one of the things I've learned at Microsoft is a lot of our developers, when they're building applications, do what we call hybrid apps, where they mix some web tech and they mix some native controls together in the same application. In this case, this is just a regular Maui app like you saw before. Click the button, thing, resize, and all that kind of stuff. But what happens if I come over here and I'm going to stick this up here, make some stuff here. I'm going to go stick a Blazor web view inside of my Maui app. And so I can actually mix web and native together in the same application. And in a lot of cases inside of Microsoft, people do this because they can build some UI in web and they want to share it across all the platforms. And so here you see I've got my native controls and I've got my web stuff. And you're like, Scott, I don't believe the web stuff is really web stuff. So let's do some, I can prove I can actually run some C# here. Let's do a simple for loop here. And Razor style, I could just do a P here and do an I in here. And so let's just run this application again. And you'll see this is real Blazor, where I'm actually running the code. There it is. I've got that all hooked up. Now, it would be cool if you could actually share the state between the native controls and the web controls. And so notice here that I injected counter state into this application. And the native control is using counter state.current. And when I click it, it calls increment count. Well, let's do that from Blazor. So in this case, I'm going to show the same variable I showed above. And on the on-click, I'm going to call the same function I called above. And this is a case of us showing that all the tech on the same page sharing the same state. I click increment here, the web changes. I click the web, the top changes. This is integrated experience. And then I can go full tilt. Let me go back here, that out, and this. In this case, I'm going to basically stick the full Blazor web app into my native app. So imagine building a full native app and then sticking a web app in it, just so you can have a mix of some native and some local. And scenarios, this might matter a whole bunch to you. What if you want to have a Blazor app that can call native code? Well, now you can. And notice that even, this is full Blazor. And even in this case, notice I'm still sharing state between the two things. And so in a lot of ways, think of this as a Electron style application where we take a Blazor application and we wrap it in a native wrapper, and then you can run it on all the platforms. So you get the benefit of being able to be full Blazor and have access to native Electron style. And so this is something that you will see us do previews of sometime later this year, hopefully. And that is Blazor or Maui plus Blazor. So let's go back over here. Where we're at today is we have previews of .NET 5 out with some of the cloud native improvements. Project High is, you can find it on GitHub. In fact, I might have had it on the slide back here. Did I? No, just Google projecthigh.net, you'll find it on GitHub. That's out today. .NET Maui will come out a little bit later around the .NET 5 RC. And Preview 4 is available right now. Preview 6 will actually be available tomorrow. A lot of folks ask me when I talk, what about UWP? You know, we shipped, the Windows team shipped UWP a couple of years ago. We did a bunch of work to make UWP support .NET Standard, which meant UWP could actually use all the .NET APIs that people were used to. But we never moved UWP to .NET Core. Well, we haven't because we knew that this was coming. WinUI is the next continuation of UWP. And so if you want to build, you know, like the best fluent and touch-friendly Windows 10 desktop applications, this is tech you might want to look at. It removes a lot of the limitations of UWP. It doesn't require running in a sandbox. You can just X-copy the app to the machine. You don't need a store. It supports all Windows 10 versions. You don't have to be on particular versions. And it supports both .NET 5 and C++. And you can go to aka.ms/WinUI, and they have previews that run on the current .NET 5 bits. When we come to the schedule, I've been saying this for a couple of years now. We now moved .NET to an annual cadence, and so you saw that we shipped .NET Core 3.1 in December. This November we'll ship .NET 5. Next November we'll ship .NET 6. Et cetera, et cetera. So it's easy to know when the new versions come out. And the more important thing there is the LTSs, which is the 3-year support versions come out every other year. So we're currently in an LTS build. .NET 5 will be a non-LTS build. So this gives .NET developers the choice to move at whatever pace they want. Remember, these are all side by side. You can put them all on the same machine. They won't break applications. And our job here is just to try to be more predictable. And then, of course, with that shipping in November of this year, you can see the ship date. I'm just giving it away right now. November 10th will be the launch of .NET 5. And with that, we'll have like a 3-day virtual event, half Microsoft employees and half the community. And that'll be at, you can sign up for that today at .NETconf.net. And I think that's old. That is kind of where we're at, and I would love to just chat and answer some questions. And if necessary, I have a few more demos we could do based on what people want to hear and see. So I will stop sharing.
Cool. So anyone have any questions? I have a couple I wrote down, but I figure I'll let others ask first.
I was going to look at the chat here too and see if anything was in the chat.
Mostly everyone enjoying what you were saying.
I love the comment about somebody using WSL2 as we speak. WSL2 is amazing, and if you do Docker on Windows, WSL2 makes Docker a billion times faster. Glad people love the Thai stuff. That's yeah, and somebody mentioned that yeah, you if you want to deploy an app to the Apple Store, and iOS App the App Store, you still have to have a Mac, but you don't have to have 100 Macs. You need to have 1 Mac.
Well, sure enough, I loved your comment about the .NET Everywhere. I was a consultant back in those days, working for a company that did mostly Java work, And so my responsibility was to figure out what this .NET thing was and how we were going to use it. And I remember going into presentation with some CEOs of our, or CIOs of our customers, explaining how, well, most of it's just a marketing thing. but let's look at this framework thing. That's what we want to focus on.
Yeah, I remember being an outsider. I obviously worked at Microsoft back in those days, but I'm like, what were they thinking? Thankfully, we don't do that anymore. We don't call like Azure Studio, or we've not like taken Azure and bolted it to everything or any other terms.
So here, I wrote a couple of questions. Some of these are kind of softballs, but it definitely should add some more conversation. So, I mean, number one, so what is your advice as towards .NET Standard and how to go forward with that?
Yeah, our advice on .NET Standard has not changed at all. So the reality is we still live in a world where we have .NET Framework applications and we have .NET Core applications, and I don't see that changing. First off, our advice to most customers is if you don't have a need to move a .NET Framework application to .NET Core, don't. If it's already working well and working good, leave it where it's at. But still, we do have, until we get to like .NET 5, if you want to share code across Xamarin, .NET Framework, and .NET Core, .NET Standard is the model to do that. And I think even as we ship .NET 5 and .NET 6, that really won't change. Once you're in the .NET 5 world, all the apps are using the exact same DCL, so you don't really have that problem of having to share code across things. But as long as you have some applications on .NET Framework or the .NET Standard will be important as long as .NET Framework is around, and I think .NET Framework's around for a long time. And one of the things we tell people is .NET Framework is not going away. It is a component of the Windows operating system, and it will live as long as Windows lives. And we will support it until then.
Like I say, as a speaker last year, who one of my talks was on .NET Standard, the build announcement, my first thought was, oh my God, did I just kill it? Did the talk just get killed? No, after looking into it more. Because you talked about it, Bill, and you talked about the other week at Tulsa, but I think it's a really good point that why Microsoft ended up pulling pulling Maui out of .NET 5 to .NET 6.
A couple reasons actually. First off, we're in a world pandemic, and the reality is we went through a phase, and I think we're still in that phase where we've actually produced more work than we had before. But we assume that I work for a great company. We have offered our employees the chance if they need to take extended leave to take care of their kids when there's no school, and or they need to take care of their kids for homeschooling, and so we will lose some productivity for that. And at the same time, also with all that going on, it felt like to make sure .NET Maui was awesome, let's not go too fast and try to do too much at the same time. And so we just kind of looked at the situation and said, let's slow down a little bit.
So I was curious if you could, story you were telling us the other week, since most everyone here didn't hear those stories, talk about the stories about your, how like your single folks are working too much and everything.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things that we noticed, there's two things that we've noticed during the work from home during the pandemic. Number one is if you're a single employee, meaning that you don't have any partner, you probably are just locked in your house. And so the inclination when you're locked in your house is just to keep doing your job. And so 5 o'clock comes, and then 6 o'clock comes, and 7 o'clock comes, and 8 o'clock comes, and you're still working. And so productivity actually increased because those people don't have anything else to do. They don't, there's no place for them to go. There's no other, minus watching some Netflix or something like that. There's not a lot of options. The other thing that we've noticed in our company is the number of people taking vacations has obviously decreased massively. And so we as managers in the company are trying to get people to still take vacations. I took spring break, even though, my kids were home. That just gave me a chance to decouple from work for a week and spend time with the family. And it was actually relaxing. Spring break in a pandemic is kind of like all the housework you've not done in the last 2 years gets done. But we're trying to be, we're trying to look out for those employees and make sure that we don't set up with a schedule that just doesn't make sense and drives those people to work too hard.
Yeah. No, that's great. So I gotta admit, so I am an MVP. So I mean, I got to hear about Maui at the summit, which I gotta admit, so I don't do UIs. You don't want me working on a UI. I'm horrible at it. But it wasn't the most exciting thing I had, because I mean, I'm more excited in like the Cosmos stuff, and I heard some great stuff there. But I was really excited when I heard about that. But more to the point, when we were coming close to the build, and it was MVPs were hearing that it was not, Maui was going to be pushed out. I was curious what was going to happen to build and what was going to be said. And I love the fact that Microsoft came straight up and said, look, it's not going to, because you didn't have to, right? Because no one knew about Maui at that point, other than, insiders. So I just love the fact that Microsoft actually said, hey, this is not going to happen. This is why it's not going to happen. Because I think it helps smaller companies also understand that, this is a hard time to get through.
I'm not saying we're perfect, but the .NET team tries to be as transparent and as open as we can. We've, especially in the .NET Core wave, we've tried to learn and not be the old Microsoft. And so we would rather confront something and tell people. It's like another one that we announced was a few months ago. We announced that we did not plan to add any more features into Visual Basic .NET.
Yeah, I'm bummed by that one.
We don't plan to get rid of Visual Basic .NET. It's something that we have a lot of customers that really enjoy Visual Basic, but we were looking at the features we were putting into C#, and we're like, these are complicated features. The whole idea of VB.NET was to be simple, and trying to shove these complicated C# features into it made no sense. But we actually came out and told the community we're not going to do any more, and that's once again because to me as a looking at the history of Microsoft, some of the things like, Silverlight died and we never told anybody. I mean, people guessed themselves. I don't want to put .NET customers ever in that position again.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be transparent and open and just tell people what we're going to do. If we're going to cancel something or slow something down, I'm not going to hide behind it and say, oh, we missed the date. No, let's just own it. And so it's part of the team strategy, just to be honest with our customers and own the decisions and tell you the decisions, not kind of sandbag them for 2 years and you go, oh, I guess they didn't really care about that.
Yeah, no, I gotta admit, I was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Vlad. I got a question. It's something totally off subject though.
Okay.
Let me finish the question. For the past 20 years, I've been following quantum computing, and Microsoft released their Azure Quantum platform, or not released, but demoed their Azure Quantum platform and build. And I think in about 3 or 5 years, it's probably going to go mainstream. Quantum computing is going to change everything: the way we do business, the way we code, everything. And they're very mathematical intense too. I mean, you just don't learn them. You have to have a background in math and physics. So, how do we as engineers, architects position ourselves in this new world with quantum computing? I want to ask Scott's opinion.
That is a great question. I think that the challenge on quantum computing is both interesting and also scary as hell. If you read any of the articles about it, the assumption is that when quantum computing comes online, any of our passwords could be cracked in like that. Not days, even 32, 64 character passwords could be cracked like instantaneously. So it's going to have a profound effect on a lot of the things that we deal with when it does come out. We have seen bits of it. I mean, you might have heard of Q#. Q# is a flavor of C# that's designed for building quantum applications. I think for us, I think it's actually further out than you think it is. I think there might be hardware in 2 or 3 years that people can try, but the real challenge is going to be, can we construct programming languages that allow the way that we think to map into that quantum computing? And so I think the real magic is going to be who's the first to build the languages and stuff that regular humans can actually use to take advantage of that hardware. I mean, we have those problems across a variety of tech today, even GPUs today. There's a whole bunch of projects on how do you write math in a right way that you can actually take advantage of the scale of GPUs, which we have not. There's been progress. There's actually some great ways of doing it in C#. There's a C# project. There's a commercial company actually. We write link expressions, and they compile the link expressions into native code that runs on the GPUs. But I think you're probably about 6 to 7 years early on the hardware, on it being something that's mainstream. But I don't know. At the same time that's going on, we're doing interesting experiments in developer division to figure out how to use AI to help us as programmers. Is there a way to use AI to help code reviews? Is there a way to use AI to look at your code base and figure out, if somebody's recreating a problem that was already fixed, a long time ago? And some of that you've seen in we have some IntelliSense kind of work we've done in the AI ML space, where we can look at your source code and change the order of stuff in IntelliSense based on what we see in your source code. And so I don't know. I'm very curious myself where that's going to land. But I think the real challenge as developers is going to be, do we have the right tools available to make it where all of us can actually write code that runs on quantum hardware? That was a softball answer.
I got it. So, Scott, when you were demoing the WSL2 stuff with the single package, with just running on WSL2, does it already have the remote debugger installed, or is it not using it at all?
So for the WSL2 demo, what I basically did is I have a VS extension, which you should see pretty soon. I assume it'll be before the Ignite conference, which I think is in October this year. I would expect to see us publicize preview the WSL extension. When I installed the WSL extension for VS, it went and ran a script inside of WSL2 that installed all the components required for the hookup that you saw to work. So it actually put .NET Core into WSL2, and it put the debugger extensions into WSL2. Very similar to the VS Code extension. There's a VS Code extension you can use today to actually hook a debugger directly up to WSL2 as well. And so you'll see us, make that experience awesome, across both .NET Framework, Visual Studio for Windows and for VS Code.
Okay. It was like a year and a half ago, I was running my Visual Studio on my desktop, but I had a Linux virtual machine in Azure running a .NET Core microservice, and I installed the remote debugger and was actually able to get it to hit breakpoints, even though it was in just 2 different cities, 2 different systems. It was fantastic. I thought that was the coolest thing.
It's amazing. To me, the best part of WSL2 is just the perf improvement. It's due to the cert issue that I have on my machine. Those cert boxes popped up. If you run it without those cert box popping up, it's when we ship the extension, it's instantaneous. A Control F5 on my i10 laptop, or 10th generation Intel i7 is just instantaneous. It's just like Control F5, Windows up. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if people know this, or enough people know this, that if I'm not mistaken, the WSL2 is full kernel sitting on Windows, And with that kind of interaction with Visual Studio and with .NET, that's neat. That's just two operating systems working together on the same hardware um, without fighting. That's, to me, I think it's cool.
Yeah, the intent there is actually we have a project that we call Win the Dev Box, and we want to make Windows the best operating system to build any application on, whether it's a Windows app or a Linux app. Today a lot of people that want to build Unixy apps use a Mac, and they use that because the Mac runs a variant of Linux.
Yeah.
And we don't want to run a variant. We want you to run the OS of your choice. So we'll give you full native Linux of the distribution of your choice on Windows. And you might have heard, I've not seen it because I don't run FastRing, but there's been plenty of articles published saying that the File Explorer is going to work into the Linux file system. So you're going to see more and more parts of Windows open that up. But it is amazing as a developer because, like Redis Cache, that is something that there are Windows ports of it, but the real thing is a Linux thing. And so if you want to run it on Linux. For years, parts of Microsoft tried to make Node.js run great on Windows, but you can't, because if you go look at the NPM package library, there's plenty of NPMs that have native code in them. And in many cases, they were written on Unix devices, and so they try to compile and they fail when they try to compile on Windows. So quit trying to make something run better on Windows. Just make it run on make Windows run the other thing better, so it's transparent. And that's that to me is a staple of modern open Microsoft, which is we care about Windows, but we know there's lots of Linux developers or people running Linux in the cloud, so let's make that awesome on Windows. By the way, the Windows terminal is very similar. Having a multicast terminal with themes. A lot of the Linux nerds love all their colors and all their stuff, so let's just bring that to you as well. That was one of the number one pieces of feedback we got by Windows. Like, why is the terminal so fun?
What was the name of that? Was it Cinnamon?
I am not sure.
Oh gosh, she's a Microsoft employee. She was demoing the Windows terminal with Scott Hanselman, and she had colors and all kinds of items.
Jeremy Sinclair is saying it was Kayla Cinnamon.
Kayla Cinnamon. There you go. Yes, I thought it was. Yeah, her terminal is way too busy, way too distracted. Yes, it proves you can.
Hanselman's is pretty crazy too. When we were doing our prepping for our talk together, he's like, Scott, your terminal sucks, and he's like, I'm like, I don't know if I need all the stuff he gave me, so.
We're just getting set in our ways. It's all right.
Oh, I do see some questions in the chat. Core CLR debug /VS for Windows ARM64. We're working on ARM64 right now. So we not only working for ARM64, I don't know if people know that, we're actually working on ARM64 versions of WinForms and WPF. So we plan to have the ability to run a native WinForm app, a native WPF app on an ARM64 Windows device with no emulation at all.
That's big. That's a big deal. If I'm not mistaken, that means you can run those on, Jeremy. You and Jeremy can correct me if I'm wrong, but that means you can run those WinForms on a Raspberry Pi running Windows.
The WinForm stuff, as long as you have a version of Windows that runs on the Raspberry Pi, but yes, you could.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get there.
We're not making a Windows emulator, so but yeah.
Gotcha. With .NET 5, when you did a single file size and you got it to shrink down to 17.5 megs, is that because of ahead of time compilation?
No, that's because of that's primarily because we're doing work. Linkers are tough, and when we as I said, there's actually a linker in .NET Core 3 and 3.1. and we made it where at least it would do a baseline WinForms WPF app. In the demo that I showed, I cheated a little bit because I basically was using some stuff where I can give the linker more information about my application. And so I kind of gave it it's, hey, I'm not using this and this and this and this. And so I gave the linker a little bit more capability to rip out the stuff that I'm not using. What we want to do over time is I imagine a world. We were just talking about this today, actually. We want to scan NuGet.org, and we want to basically label NuGet packages as safe for linking, with the hope that the authors of the ones that are not safe for linking will reach out to us and we can help them fix the packages to be more safe for linking. We would love to have an analyzer in Visual Studio that as you type code, we tell you the cost of calling that method. Oh, you called that. That's 6 megs. Oh, crap. Maybe I don't want to call that. Maybe I can do something instead of that. But AOT is something that's a little further out for us. We originally had plans to get AOT into .NET 5, and it didn't pan out as much as we want. The AOT that we have today, we have 2 AOTs. We have the mono AOT, and that's used for building Android and iOS apps today. The problem with the mono AOT is it's not been stress tested for web scenarios. And so when we ran it against ASP.NET Core, and then we ran that on Tech and Power, which is like the most evil stress test you can think of, we didn't get the results that we wanted. And so we still want to get to a point where you can basically use the mono AOT against any .NET app type. But we have work to do to clean that up, and so it didn't fit scope. We have another project that I don't like the fact we call it .NET. There's something called Core RT out there, and Core RT is a full AOT implementation on .NET. The problem with Core AOT or Core RT is that a whole bunch of things just don't run on Core RT. I showed earlier, I was saying the linker, we can tell it, hey, be gentle and don't rip this out and don't rip that out. Getting ASP.NET Core to run on Core RT is damn near impossible. And that's because Core RT doesn't understand all the dependency injection that we have in ASP.NET Core. And so it doesn't know what to do with all that code. So there's similar projects in the Java space. There's one called Graal. Once again, it runs a small percentage of Java code. That said, we have found that some customers, just because they like C# and they like the programming language, they're willing to go try something like Core RT, even though it's not very compatible. I have to be careful with it because I don't want to call it .NET because it's not compatible. And people in the chat were saying that they've actually already tried our ARM64 WinForms and have it working today, which is awesome.
That's Jeremy Sinclair, and he's a MVP as well, and he plays around a lot and beats up Windows quite a bit. So he definitely has the inside info on a lot of that good stuff, and he's been drooling over ARM64 goodness.
For Scott George, who was asking about writing music software for a long time, I'd have to talk to Richard Leonard, my team. I assume you mean talking to MIDI and stuff like that is what you're talking about. I need more details of what you're doing or what you're writing to know how to answer that.
All right, so let me ask a harder question that you might not be able to answer. But so what's the vision for .NET past 6?
I don't know. The vision of .NET past 6 is actually some of the most exciting parts. In many ways, if you look at the work we've done in .NET Core 1 through 3, I would call it catch-up work in many cases. And then in the .NET 5.6 wave, we're bringing the last of the tech, the Xamarin Tech, into the full .NET Core fold. And so as soon as we get past .NET 6, the world becomes a little murkier, because once you have all the main workflows running, what do you do next? I do think the stuff that I would think of would be the the AOT tech, the linking tech would obviously be big things there. An area that we want to do hopefully before .NET 7 is from a language standpoint, C#. We do a lot of work in the compiler, but we haven't done a lot of work where the C# language and utilizes work from the runtime team. So we think a lot of newer C# features are going to require runtime support, and that's super exciting to me. In what we can do there, there's features in the compiler today where there's compiler tricks where, like, if you write an iterator actually writes a lot of code. If we had a runtime feature, we can make the iterator code a lot smaller. One that my team hears me chat about all the time is when .NET Framework was originally built, it tried to take advantage of every Windows feature there was. One of those Windows features it took advantage of was something called structured exception handling. And so when there's an exception thrown in .NET, we basically go through the Windows structured exception handling code. Because of that, exceptions in .NET are expensive. If I unwound that, and so if you're coming from Java exceptions are cheap. So I think there's a whole bunch of stuff like that, but I don't know yet, but I'm excited.
Cool.
Trust me, we always find stuff.
Yeah. Sure. If you do have a couple other questions coming up in the chat.
Yeah, I would want to hook them up with Rich Lander. I think Rich would be a great person. Yeah, given the implementation of Docker support in recent versions of .NET, can you speak to the general importance and growth of microservice application architecture and containerization in contrast to monolithic architecture? First off, one of the cool things about being a Microsoft employee is I get to talk to a lot of customers, and a lot of customers fly into Redmond to meet various parts of the teams, and I get to go talk to them. And so the microservice thing has been funny to watch because we had people come in 4 years ago, and their idea of a microservice application was we're going to take this application and turn it into 25 pieces. They've all come back now and said that was a terrible mistake because trying to keep the versioning and dependencies correct across the 25 microservices ended up being overwhelming and too much for them. And so most of them come back and say, really what we want to do is we want to break the application up into a couple of pieces. And so when I think of monolithic versus microservice, I think you're looking at taking an app and breaking it into a couple of components versus being a single self-contained component in the past. And most teams tell us they want that because it allows the various teams and their organizations to move at different velocities. If you're so tightly coupled that you have to build the entire stack, and I have gotten customers that it would scare you that they've got 25 million lines of code and they touch one file, they build the entire thing. But I think really I look at microservices more as saying, I want to optimize for modern DevOps, break my project into 2 or 3 pieces, and let those projects be able to rev at their own independent speeds versus, cutting something up into 1 million pieces. That said, if you look at some of the stuff like Thai that we showed today, I think all of us would benefit from not having to install a SQL Server or Postgres or Redis or whatever, making it easier for us to have dev environments that match reality without installing the junk on our machines is super cool. And I think that work is coming out of the microservice work. And even cooler is, I didn't do a demo of code spaces, but even the crazier ideas, imagine the world where, I see some customers today that have, apps still built on .NET Framework 1.0, even though it's out of support, and they've got some version of Visual Studio 2002 installed on a developer box to work on that. The whole container space excites me as well, from being able to actually have these remote environments that I use versus having to install the junk on my machine. I promise you at Ignite this year, that's one of our conferences later this year, one of us it'll be Hanselman or I, we'll build a .NET Core project or a .NET 5 project on an iPad with code spaces. You throw a keyboard on a tablet, and you're just as productive as you were on a with a fancy laptop.
Anyone else have any questions?
Yep, September. And Ignite will be virtual like Build, which means it'll be available to everybody. So it will not be Microsoft is, we're virtual on all conferences that we put on through June of next year. So next year's Build will also be virtual again.
Unfortunately, it means Summit will also be virtual again. I finally...
Basically, when we declared that fiscal year 21, so for Microsoft, our year starts July 1st, and we declared that basically the entire fiscal year of 21, everything is virtual. Which I will say that I both love the virtual aspect from the standpoint that it makes things available to more people, but I really miss the human connection that we get at things like the MVP Summit and even Build. In fact, that was my feedback of this Build, was in our sessions at Build, even the 20-minute ones, we still had hundreds of questions in like the very short ones. I only got to see 4 or 5 of the questions that were asked. I finally today was able to get all the questions, but you just missed that personal touch of I don't know what the vibe was. I know what the social networking vibe was, but I miss being at the booth and hearing people come and tell me their stories.
I would say, I attended most of Build. Build, and one of the hard parts was like the screen wouldn't necessarily refresh the chat very often. Yeah. So it looked as if there was no chat happening. But then you would do something and accidentally refresh the page, and also you see a whole bunch of chat.
I'm sure that tech will be better by Ignite, because I'm sure they got that feedback from other folks as well. I'm still impressed we pulled it off, because we pulled that conference off in like 6 weeks, while a bunch of our other friends had to cancel their conferences. So
really, the biggest accomplishment was getting Build done, which was done in like 2 weeks. I mean, not Build, MVP Summit.
Yeah,
because that was
crazy too. Build was really tough for us this year because of the online nature of it. Normally, Build, this sounds crazy, but we actually have. Normally our bits that we use, the bits that we show off in demo, come in so hot that they're basically, we get final builds like 2 or 3 days before our talk. Sometimes it's the day before the talk. And this year, because of the virtual aspect of it, we had to have all of that done 2 weeks before build. So it made the deadlines all crazier. It wasn't possible to bring a crazy late thing in this time, because in some cases, most of us recorded a long version of our talk. And so if you're going to record the long version, those had to be turned in weeks before. So we survived.
Like I said, from a lot of people I heard, they really enjoyed it. Learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I thought it was great that we had Scott Hanselman come out. Normally Build kind of has Scott Guthrie or Rajesh come out and do a bunch of Azure-y, businessy kind of stuff. And I think it was fun to start off with a bunch of levity and a bunch of real developer stuff. I was super excited about that.
And it was nice with Satya putting the Easter eggs, on his wall and such.
Yes, that was actually not Satya's real normal way his house looks. Just
I figured as much, but still.
Well, to be honest, we wouldn't know. So, I mean, he's never called me. He never said, "Come on over for dinner." So,
I only know Sean because I know people that worked on it. So, if it wasn't for that, I've never seen Satya's house either. So
Like I admit, you look at 2 different CEOs, And you got Balmer with his developers. Right, yeah, so very, very upfront, and then you got Satya just with something in the background that you have to, you had to really think about what that was supposed to mean.
There were some crazy Easter eggs there. I don't know if people know there was Easter eggs in some of the videos. You had to go through the videos frame by frame, and people found those things. So there was a ton of hidden Easter eggs in builds, and people found them all.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to end the stream because I do find sometimes people are shy to ask questions because we're publicly broadcasting. So for those that are on the Twitch stream, thank you for joining tonight. As I was mentioning on the other chat, we will post this to YouTube, but I have to wait 24 hours. That's Twitch rules because I'm an affiliate. And sure enough, I'll be back online like I normally am tomorrow at 11:30, where we'll be working again on the Gremlin ORM that I've been working on. So for everyone out in the Twitch land, thanks for joining. All right, and